Ah, okay. Great. Yeah, so Matthew wants to switch up his stop loss trailing here. So he's using the Ichimoku indicator. All right, so he has a stop loss that's following the K line, probably the Kensu line. And then after a certain amount of profit, he would like to switch over to the Tenkan-sen line. Yeah, the Tenkan line. All right. Yeah, that'll be easy to do. All right. Let me see which is which. Okay, so the blue is the T line, the red is the K line. Let's see. So again, you are starting with the K line, yeah, and then switching to the Tenkan line. Okay, yeah, that makes sense, right? So we can see that the Kijun line is further away, and the Tenkan line is a little closer to price. All right, so there we go. We got our indicators up, and all right, so I should pull the market down a little bit, get out of this consolidation here. All right, so let's open BlackBird up, and we'll just create a market entry order. We'll skip the stop loss. So this question is focusing on the stop loss, or we'll skip the profit target. I'm sorry, skip the profit target, and we'll focus on the stop loss. Let's see here. So I'm wondering if I can use one of these here to save me some time. No. All right. Yeah, let's just so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off using the ATR. Yeah, so Matthew mentions using an ATR as a profit level to switch stop loss lines here. So yeah, so I'm going to start off using just a simple ATR stop loss. And what I'll do is, let me just switch it to, I don't know what the heck, a 3 ATR, just for good measure. All right. So, you'll notice that, let's see here just a moment. Okay. So Matthew also would like to add an ATR trailing and use whichever trailing is closer to price, is tighter to the price there. So, all right, yeah, we can do that. Neutralize the trend here before it takes off there. All right, so you'll notice that the initial placement, I'm using, a simple offset method. And the reason for that is, what happens to a lot of people is they'll set the initial placement to an indicator, but as we can see, indicators are not always in the correct position for a stop loss, right? It's very easy that your indicator will be on the wrong side of the market to use it as a stop loss. And so if you set so if you're using an indicator and it's on the wrong side of the market, what happens is your trade gets skipped. BlackBird can't place a stop loss in the wrong spot, and so it will just skip the trade, depending on your settings there. So it's better to just at least place your stop loss using something that will work, that is guaranteed to work every single time, right? And so a simple ATR stop loss is always guaranteed to work, or a simple tick offset. You could just say 25 ticks or whatever. A simple tick offset is always guaranteed to work as a stop loss. Indicators are not guaranteed to work all the time. So you want your initial placement to basically be guaranteed to work, just as a good practice there. And then we'll go into the trailing rules here, and to turn them on, we're going to create some custom trailing rules here. And then we can have our trailing rules immediately move our 3 ATR stop loss. We can have it immediately move it to the indicator. And of course, BlackBird will make sure, or actually, I'm sorry, we can put a check in to make sure that our indicator is on the correct side of the market before moving the stop loss there, right? So, all right, so let's start creating our first trailing roll, which is going to be, moving our stop loss to the Kijun-sen line, provided the Kijun-sen is on the correct side of the market, right? And so again, the Kijun-sen is the red line here. So, all right. So let's see here in the action. So to get your stop loss, right, to follow an indicator, we go to the action, and we're going to move the order to. We're going to move it to. And we don't want to move it to the last price. We want to move it to an indicator value. And so let's go in here and change our indicator. And we will switch it over to the Ichimoku. There we go. And let's open this up a little bit. And we want the Kijun-sen. So let's select the Kijun-sen line like that. All right. And there we go. It was just as simple as that. But now we need to put a check in, right? So we want to make sure that if you're in a long trade, obviously you need price, you need the current market to be above the Kijun-sen line, right? So in the triggers are where we can, verify. We can do various checks, to make sure that price is on the correct side of the indicator. And to do that, we can use the price versus indicator check or trigger. Let's open this up a little bit. All right. So, we can just simply make sure that the closing price of the bar is on the right side of the market there. And then input B, right, that will be our Ichimoku indicator. So again, let's go find that indicator, the Ichimoku, and we want to compare the closing price to the Kijun-sen line, right? Like there. So we'll select the Kijun-sen, like so. And of course, remember guys, if you're using, custom settings for your Ichimoku indicator, remember to go in there and make those adjustments as necessary here. Yeah, so for example, the Kijun, right, it actually has a period setting. So obviously that would be critical to make sure that your period setting matches what you have on the chart, right? Otherwise you're telling BlackBird to use a different Kijun period setting. So make sure that you go in there and adjust any indicator settings, that are going to affect the Kijun-sen line there, plot, right? So. All right, so we have the Ichimoku in place. We have the Kijun line selected. And so now we need to make sure that the long trade mode is correct. So A is equal or above B. So what is A? So if we're on a long trade, right, we want the closing price of the bar, yes, to be above input B, right? We want input A to be above input B for a long trade. So this would be correct. Although we probably don't want to do it if A is equal to B, we probably want just A above B, at least. So we'll just kind of switch them to that just for a level of safety. And something else that you might want to consider is to actually make sure that there's a little buffer difference. So maybe you might want to make sure that the closing price of the bar is like at least 10 ticks, above your indicator line, before moving your stop loss to that indicator, right? So you might want to build a buffer in. So what you could do either you could take the price and say, okay, take the price and minus 10 ticks, right? So if you subtract 10 ticks from the price, right? So let's say if we're looking at the close, the close of this bar where my mouse is, you take that closing price of the bar and then subtract 10 ticks down, right? And that's the price that gets calculated, and we would compare that calculated price to the indicator, right? And making sure that the calculated price for A is above the indicator price, right, for B. So that's how you could kind of build in a certain amount of separation, between price and your indicator, right? So you could either take price and do that, or we could take the indicator and, add 10 ticks. So we could take the indicator here. Let's see if that shows up. Yeah, there we go. If we stretch that way out. So we're taking the indicator plot and adding 10 ticks, right? So we would take the red line and add 10 ticks above it. And so we would compare the closing price to this calculated price, right? So either way works, however you can best visualize it, in your mind, you can add some kind of an offset like that, right? So let's see here also, but let's see, just for the sake of this demonstration, let me just kind of minimize it down to 5 ticks like that, right? So that is our check, right? So we're going to make sure that there's a clearance between price and your indicator before having your indicator, trail, before having your stop loss start trailing an indicator, right? And then the last thing is, you probably want your indicator to keep following that indicator, you want your stop loss to keep following that indicator. And so we want to set the repeat to indefinitely there, like so, right? So there you go. That's that's a rundown of just setting up the initial stop loss there, right? So this gets the stop loss to follow the K line. And so now we want to switch over to following the Tenkan-sen line after a 2 ATR profit. So, there we go. So, there. All right. So, here we go. So, we got a name here. So, we now want to trail the Tenkan, at or after a 2 ATR profit. So, in the trigger, so for the trigger, we need to put in that 2 ATR profit check, right? So we need to check for that profit. So we're going to use the profit or loss. And so the mode is we're looking for a profit. And the units is not currency, but we want ATR. Yep, so the units is going to be ATR. Of course, you can put the ATR period in there. And then the minimum profit amount that we're looking for is 2. So plug a 2 in there. And there we have it. So we're looking for at least 2 ATR in profit. So once this condition has been triggered, once it becomes true, then our action will be to start trailing the Ichimoku, and this time we want the Tenkan-sen line there. So we'll just select the Tenkan-sen plot, right? Like so. And then lastly, we want, right, when the stop loss switches over to the Tenkan-sen line, we want the stop loss to keep following that Tenkan-sen line, indefinitely. obviously until either it gets hit or until the profit target gets hit, right? So there's that. All right. So now the last condition is Matthew would also like to add in a 2 ATR trailing along with following the let's see, wait, okay, all right. Actually, Matthew would like to do a comparison here of, so either follow the Kijun-sen line or do a 2 ATR trailing, whichever one is tighter, the tightest to price there. So, all right, so we're going to add another rule here. And let's see here, 2 ATR. Yeah, we don't need a check for this one. Yeah, so we can skip the check for that one. And we can just jump straight to the action, which the action, is going to be, we're going to take the last price. The last price is basically the market's, last printed price. So that's basically that. The last is the live market data that's coming in, right? And then we're going to use an offset here. So we want a 2 ATR offset from the last price. So let's set that up. All right, there's ATR. And of course, you'll want to set your ATR period there. The ATR only has one plot, so that's already done for us. And then lastly, we want to set it to a 2 ATR, right? So it's going to be a -2. So for a long trade, right, it's going to be a -2 ATRs because we want to be below the market, right, for a long trade. And so this will also need to have a repeat indefinitely. So what Bloodhound's going to do, right, is we actually have 3 trailing rules here. So how do you know which one BlackBird's going to use? Well, that is what the evaluate using is for, right? That is what this determines. So by default, it says action closest to price, right? What's the action? Well, this is the action, right? This column here, so all of these prices, right? So BlackBird's going to be calculating this 2 ATR price, and BlackBird is going to be looking at the Ichimoku indicator and it's going to be getting the Kijun plot line price, right? So it's going to be getting the price from the Kijun line, and then also BlackBird's going to be getting the price from the Tenkan line as well. However, this one, remember, this actually has a condition. So for the Tenkan trailing rule, this trailing rule is going to be ignored until we get this 2 ATR profit target reached, right? So in the beginning, BlackBird is only going to be evaluating the 2 ATR trailing or the Kijun line and figuring out, okay, which price or which action. Remember, action, what the action is doing is it's calculating the prices for your stop loss, right? So because, for these actions, right, we're using the move to. And so if you're going to move a stop loss to something, you got to calculate the price. So really what the action is doing is, what we're using is to calculate a price, right? The action can do other things. That's why it's called an action, right? The action can send you an email. It could play a sound. It could put a message on the chart for you. You could draw a chart symbol on the chart, right? So there are actual other actions, but what most people are doing is they're using the move order to action, which is calculating a price, right? So all of our actions are using the move order to, and so that is a price calculation action, right? So all of these actions are just calculating a price. So, so the evaluate is saying use action, which is, in our case, calculate a price. So use the calculated price that is closest to the market price. And so in this case, price here is short for market price, right? Wherever the current market price is. So, right. So, so this evaluate using it, the default setting here, it's going to look at both of these trailing rules and see, which one is going to calculate a price that's closest to the market price. And it'll use, whichever one of those. And then once two ATRs of profit have been achieved, once we get the 2 ATRs of profit, now BlackBird will have to look at all 3 trailing rules and figure out which one is closest to the market, and it will use that. It looks like that the Tenkan line is probably going to be the one that's closest to the market, right? So it looks it's most probable that the action closest to price is going to switch over to the Tenkan line once we get to 2 ATRs of profit. Let's see. However, that's not guaranteed, of course. That's not a guarantee. So, I'm just kind of thinking if there's a way to actually deactivate these 2 trailing rules. And actually, I think there is. Repeat until... okay. So if we really, really wanted to get really detailed and technical here, we can use the repeat until to actually cancel these first 2 trailing rules. And so that way, BlackBird is only left with the trail Tenkan line as the remaining valid or active trailing rule. So this repeat until, we can go in here and say, okay, let's look for a 2 ATR profit. There we go. So the profit or loss, we're looking for a 2 ATR, right? Our units is ATR. And of course, remember to adjust your ATR period. And so we're using the minimum amount here, which is going to be a 2 ATR, right? Which is what we set up here, right? So remember in the trailing rule for the Tenkan-sen, right? If we look at this profit or loss, we're using profit. The units is ATR, and we're using the minimum amount here of 2 ATR. And so we're just going to do that in our repeat for the trailing 2 ATR trailing, right? And then we can do the same for the Kijun line as well. We can set this to repeat until, and let's see, repeat until, and great. Yep. So this setting was already cached for us. So we got minimum amount. If you notice, BlackBird kind of has this automatic caching to try and kind of guess what you want to use. So it's going to remember what you did before. And so you can see it automatically filled everything in there for me to kind of help save me some time. So there we go. At least 2 ATR and profit. And so this other one is set to 2 ATR and profit. Right. So there we go. Shrink this up a little bit. There. Yeah, so using the repeat until, we can actually cancel out these first two trailing rules. So that way when the trade actually achieves 2 ATRs of profit, only this last trailing rule is remaining active. It's the last one that'll remain active there. Yeah, there you go. I think this covered everything there for you, Matthew.